Welcome to today's kickoff to a week-long event. I am so excited to be joined by a couple powerhouse women who are kicking off the week. I wanted to start off by saying this is so Monday for, 15 minutes before a meeting, everything's fine. And then right when we hit admit, it begins to go haywire. So it's pretty par for the course when it comes to these things. So I'm really excited to see so many folks here, just to give the audience a little bit of an understanding of where this program came from, what we aim to do here, and the type of demographic that's going to be participating all week. We wanted to open and extend, and this sort of comes from my background of having, participated in several different areas of my career path along the way, but also not having a conventional linear line to what I do today, which is I'm head of marketing for an AI firm called WonderBotz, who's graciously given us the opportunity to host this today. And in that, in reviewing and reflecting on what I've done, I realized that all the speaking events that I do to help and mentor, the theme is always, you do this, you go to college, you do a trade school, and then, you climb the ranks. And this path wasn't exactly what I experienced. And every time I would give one of these talks, I said, my gosh, there's more people like me out there. I know that, right? Now, throughout the course of, kind of creating this and sort of, taking this leadership role at WonderBotz, I realized that my platform is not only great for bringing in new clients to WonderBotz, that's awesome, but it's really important for me to give back and to help the community recognize that my why is about helping other people rise. It really is. And if you see the way that I interact with my team, if you see the love and the rapport that we have, I never thought I'd be a manager of people. I never thought I'd be that type of a leader. But it's really about empathy. I understand what's going on in their families. I understand what's going on, with different, things that they go through, right? Things that they have to overcome. And I take the time to make sure that they're heard, because I think that's a really important part of what we're here to do. So being in a position of leadership without giving back, I think is futile, right? I don't think that there's any point in being in any kind of significant place unless you're fully able to give back. So this week, we pulled together 8 women from a diverse set of backgrounds and locations. We actually have representation from every time zone, which is pretty impressive. And so apologies for those of you who are just waking up and those of you who are just going to sleep, but we had to get a time slot that worked for everybody. So every day this time, all week, there will be some speakers, female leaders, who are going to be sharing their story and how they rose to the top. And hopefully, the mix of audience that we have, it's partners, it's friends, it's peers, but we have a lot of college kids and early career, enthusiasts that are really trying to figure out what their place in the world is. So I'm thrilled, especially for them. This is going to be recorded, and content snacks will be shared throughout the course of the year, because I don't think that Women's History Month should be the only time that we amplify these stories. But for the end of March, this is what we're going to do. So my name is Paula. I'm so thrilled to be here. I'm honored to host these fantastic women. So we're going to give them a chance to give you a quick rundown of who they are, where they come from, why I think they're awesome. I'll share after. And we'll get into a little bit of a discussion. We want to leave the last 15 minutes open for questions. We had a few that were submitted in advance, so we'll definitely take the time to get to those. But as the discussion goes on, feel free to add questions into the little Q&A bubble at the top of your screen, and or just save them for the end, and we'll give you a chance to ask them live, okay? So with that, Rebecca, I'll turn it over to you, and you can go ahead and get us started.
Yay, I get to kick off your week. I'm so excited. And like I said, I'm T-minus 36 hours from vacation, so I'm so happy to share this with you all. And I'm actually doing another talk tomorrow at my university, similar, and so super excited to be here and spread women leadership. You'll hear in a minute, it's my passion. So my story is I started out, I've been in the healthcare IT world for, gosh, I don't know, 17 plus years. I started working for a EHR, electronic healthcare vendor called Meditech. I then went on to work for a hospital and worked for Dell Consulting, which is where I really got a lot of leadership and training, traveling all over the United States, Canada, Puerto Rico. to do those hospital electronic health records installs. That was really when we were still on paper going to computer. So I feel ancient now. But doing all those installs and getting all of that experience was huge. And so it allowed me to move on to my next step. After having my first one, I got recruited to go work in Vermont and be CIO, and I was 30 years old. So I was one of 3 females on the executive board, and probably, they all had me by at least 20 years. So as I'm sitting there very pregnant with my second one, as I was CIO, they're all, being grandmas and grandpas. And so I had to find my way that way, and political as well, the politics of healthcare. And so worked there for a while. I built up the IT team, put all the people in the right seats. I like to say I find the diamonds in the rough. So a couple of people had never worked in IT before, but we trained them up. And then some of my administrative assistants went on to work for the VP of marketing, or actually one is now a CIO at a bank. And so super excited to help promote both of those females to their new roles and their ranks where they are today. I then went on to stepped out of healthcare, took a role and at another health system, realized that I need to be back in IT because that role was not in IT. And the hospital was actually doing very bad financially. So at the height of my career, I found myself laid off. So that was like a huge hit, right? Everybody will go through it at some point in their career. And I didn't know what to do. I took the summer off, and being an athlete, I trained for my first marathon, deciding what I was going to do. I also knew I wasn't a teacher, and so having the summer off with my 2 children, I soaked it up while trying to, hit the road with lots of thoughts. And so it was my husband that said, "Why don't you just go start your own company?" and pushed me off that ledge. And so I did. He trusted, believed in me. It's my voice in the background, my introvert. So I've had Bluebird Tech Solutions for we're going to be about 7 years now. We're an IT consulting firm. Most of the bulk of our work now is we help health tech startups and go to market. And so from their idea to helping them build the brand to helping them strategically align their roadmaps. And so we have various customers that we advise for that. But then with COVID and COVID changed everybody, right? So with COVID happening, I had this idea in my head for so long, being the only female in the IT room for too many years. And so it'll be 2 years this June that I founded my 501c3 not-for-profit Bluebird Leaders, and we're creating a community for women in healthcare and IT. And we even have some business women that trickle in because in some way they're in healthcare IT. Last year at our annual conference, we had a psychiatrist join, but she does telehealth. So she's kind of business, but not really geeked out IT like some of us. So we have a very broad conference. So that's my passion project. And we have a whole mentor program and online community as well. I said I'm going on vacation in T-minus 36 hours, but that's actually tied in to our first annual executive retreat. So there'll be about 10 of us in Aruba with Katherine Jenkins, who's 3-time Emmy Award winner for public speaking. So we're super excited about that as well. And then my day job that pays the bills. I got recruited over a year ago by the CEO to come and work for Divergent, and they are IT healthcare consulting advisory firm that helps large organizations all over the country. And so I'd say don't burn any bridges. It comes back. Because he was actually one of my first teachers in a Chime boot camp or a CIO boot camp that I took when I was 30. So flash forward many years, and here I am working right underneath him. So Paula, that's my story in a nutshell.
Thank you so much, Rebecca. And and I think it's so awesome. The way that I met Rebecca was actually via LinkedIn. So don't knock that one until you've tried it. But I
Yeah.
met her on LinkedIn from a suggestion from somebody else that's in the intelligent automation community who I was working with to figure out an introduction. And I said, by the way, I'm doing this, week of wonder women around the world. If you have anybody in your network that you think is powerful, strong, would be, a great ad. And immediately he said, I know just the person, Rebecca. And we were then introduced, and the rest is history. So,
Yeah.
and I'll be participating in Rebecca's event, later this year. So, it
Yeah.
really does go full circle, and the importance of being kind and maintaining relationships, I think, is just so crucial, especially in today's landscape where we do have a lot of digital, we do have a lot of virtual, interactions, and it's important to leave the humanity, in each of those
Yeah.
moments. So,
Yeah.
so I'm going to turn it over to Sonal, who I've known actually a little bit longer. I did not meet on LinkedIn. She's a very important partner to my company and a very dear friend at this point too. And this is another very cool thing that happens in networking with women that have been through these similar stories, is you not only build that bond on what we're trying to do day in and day out to Rebecca's point, to pay the bills, but it's also about how do we live, right? And what do we do to augment ourselves and make ourselves better? And Sonal immediately shared the same passions that I do for helping empower women. She has a daughter herself, which I'm sure is the source of a lot of that inspiration for being the awesome person that she is. So Sonal, thank you so much for so freely and willingly being able to participate today. Why don't you share a little bit about yourself and how you got to your position as VP at UiPath?
Oh my goodness. So thank you, Paula, for doing this work and for allowing us to be here. And Rebecca's story is so awesome. So some big shoes to fill here. And one of the things it's very interesting, and I'll share along my story, is the journey. And I thought my journey was kind of zigzagging, but in comparison to this distinguished panel that you've put together, Paula, I'm not so sure, but I'm excited to share it. So thank you. I guess I could start with before I knew what it really was, I had a girl dad, right? So my dad was definitely a big inspiration in terms of I don't know if I appreciated growing up and deciding what my path was, but I certainly do now. But that also comes with the other side, right? There's usually 2 or 3 sides to every story. And, being an immigrant, right? My parents being immigrant, myself being an immigrant, coming into America as a young person, learning the ways here, right? Because we spoke differently, we ate differently, we dressed differently. And then, it was a big part of to assimilate. So that was a big part of my story, but it makes me who I am, and I'm very proud of that. With that, I started in engineering. But perhaps to what Rebecca was saying is being the only girl, particularly back in engineering, way back then, and being in the basement at 2 a.m. writing code was just not my people. It didn't feel like my community. It didn't feel like the people I really wanted to engage with. And nothing against the engineering thing, but it's really evolved in the lots of double-digit years that I've been doing this in a very positive way because of people like yourself, Paula, and Rebecca, and other people on the panel that really make an impact around this, right? So I decided that I needed to get out of college in 4 years because that's the amount of money I had and the time I had. And so I decided to graduate with a business marketing degree. Well, it served me well because learning some of the how of technology and having that inherent desire, as well as some genetic code from my father being an engineer, as well as the experiences of being around that type of environment, made me want to finish my business degree, but wanted me to find something that was connected to technology. Well, it's kind of the being in the right place at the right time, but knowing what to do with that, right? So I moved from Ohio, which is where my family landed, to the West Coast in California. I followed my heart, so to speak, because it was a young man that I was interested in having a life with, right? And kind of figured out I'll do it. I had family, so it wasn't like blazing trails on my own that I connected with, and I landed. And I knew I really wanted to go back to Ohio to visit my friends and the family I have there. And so I found a job that was in technology that connected me back to what was really grounding for me, which is where I grew up, but also allowed me to go into a new place. Because my first job out of college was a banker. And that was great, but it wasn't my passion. Technology clearly is, because that's the career I've chosen for the past lots of years. And so with that, I honestly, I built my best friends, right? So the friends that I had out of my second job out of college, but literally my first technology job, are the same friends, female and male, that I've had for the entire part of my career. And some of the companies we work together, and some of the companies we have not. But it's what's allowed us for me to do is really build my what we say now is like board of advisors, or community, or my network. And so that really either pulled me along or it pushed me along, whichever way you want to say that, right? So for the first half of my career in technology, I've always been on the manufacturer side. So either manufacturing of great like hardware, or now manufacturing of great software. But the thing is all oriented around the customer, which I firmly believe is the important part of our journey, right? And for the first half, I was really an individual contributor salesperson. It really taught me that around being centric around the customer. It really taught me around the connection of technology moving a business forward. It really taught me of how to work with lots of different functions internally at the organization, as well as lots of different functions externally. It taught me around how to like be on time, how to have a proper proposal, how to like dress the part. It was also really hard because it was the only girl in the room. And it wasn't so much about being in the room. That one was fine, between my own personal growth, people who were pushing me, learning some hard lessons, like getting laid off. I sat and cried for a couple hours, and then I called one of my girlfriends that I connected with, and she helped me walk myself off the ledge. But that's a life lesson as well. And, part of that is in that journey is figuring out like who are your sponsors, who are people that talk about you in the room, as well as actually talk more positively or champion you outside of the room. And so going back to being in the room, being on a call like this in the Zoom world, or being in the conference room, that was fine. I had confidence. I learned some lessons. I'm a lifelong learner, but it was outside of the room. When we exited the room, typically the guys would go somewhere and we were kind of left, or myself was kind of left by myself. And that didn't feel good at all. And I would say that over my career, it has changed because I found the places that I fit in. I have, being a lifelong learner, I'm being curious. I'm trying to find people, male and female, that would actually be invitive, be inclusive, be open arms. And it didn't come with just constant cheering and rah-rah. It came with a lot of very specific, critical in a positive way, feedback. And understanding that that feedback allowed me to continue to grow in my journey is probably the best thing I could say. And I also realized that people usually don't take the time to give you feedback unless they really want to support you, whatever may that be. So the feedback is a gift, and it's something that sometimes it's hard to hear, and sometimes it doesn't make sense. And that's where, we lean on ourselves and lean on others to figure out how to take that feedback or take that learning and catapult you. So going to kind of this journey that I'm in now, I chose from the direct sales to be with this partner ecosystem that I'm now part of. And that was a whole new experience as well, right? Like learning that, oh, there's business that's done outside of just a direct sale. And what is that business? And where they're working with billion-dollar, like the global systems integrators, or very boutique, niched, very specialized small businesses. It really grew me as a person to learn different skills. And it really grew my business acumen and thankfully my network, right? The people that really bring me joy, like Paula and others that I've yet to meet, and people that that just open up new opportunities and new doors. So now I'm part of a company that actually took me from my previous company and followed myself through mentors and sponsors and people I knew to be at this company that I'm at, UiPath, and working with our partner ecosystems to really deliver the same outcomes that I did at the beginning of my journey, but perhaps in a more advanced way because technology is advanced. And to Rebecca's point, now as a leader at UiPath, it's also about more accountability. So the accountability is always centric around the customer, but the accountability is around raising the team, around knocking down walls to get the job done, right, in a most successful way. It's about bringing new ideas. It's about being inclusive. It's about doing the best that you can. And I'll just leave you with this because I'm probably out of my time, is that we just had our sales kickoff and our CEO brought a book forward to all those attended and even those who didn't attend. And we could just click on a link and the book showed up in our home. And it was very important because it's around essentialism and it's around, mindset and the path we choose. But it's all about, how do we do less but better? And the how part, I think, is what was very interesting to learn from all of you and what I continue to do in my career.
That's so fantastic. And you didn't think that you had a zigzag story to share. That's fantastic. And I love what you said, because I hadn't really thought about it. I was really reflecting on what you said about, in the room versus outside of the room. And I think somehow I subconsciously picked up golf along the way, because so many business conversations were happening on the golf course. And I would leave the meeting going, wait, we didn't get everything done. What happened? And I picked it up. I love it to this day. I don't think it's just a male dominated sport, but it's an interesting thought, right? That we did have to sort of get creative and meander our way into different areas, to be in the room, outside the room. So I think that's fantastic. And you also mentioned a few things that I think, get over, politicized sometimes. The concept of, I'm first generation born American, there's nothing political about that, but there are obstacles that have to do with that, or lessons that my parents weren't necessarily innately able to teach me about my career path, as a result of that journey. So I think that's another common thread that we seem to bond on is there's, in the female community, there's obstacles to overcome, right? And so, Sonal, you mentioned a few of them. Rebecca, in our brief intro, and I'll invite you back onto the spotlight. I'm learning this platform, guys, so forgive me. I think it's called Spotlight in this world. So, Rebecca, why don't you share a little bit about what you were telling me about, your experience in college, some of the things that you had to overcome to even kind of make the mark and get it done. You're now this, this powerful CEO, fantastic leader of a nonprofit, but school wasn't always your thing. So why don't you share a little bit about that? Because I love that too. I love AI and the space that I'm in, because so many people that aren't traditionally, going through the normal ranks, so to speak, of a college education can still be wildly successful. And if you look at Glassdoor, the salaries for people in my industry are out of control. This day and age, RPA developers are making more than junior sales professionals at their, complete on target earnings. So it's pretty remarkable what it's done. So I'd love for you to share with everybody that, because it's such a story of hope.
Yeah, I mean, I encourage everybody to find out what their superpower is and really dig in deep for that, right? And you have more than one superpower. You don't have to have just one. And so I've, gone out and talked to people about finding their, taking their challenges and turning them into superpower and allowing to be a little bit more vulnerable. And I think that comes with my age, that now I'm just like, I'll just tell everybody my problems, because I think you all have the similar ones too, right? And so, for me, school was always a struggle. I sucked at it. I'm a hands-on learner, and so the regular school system just doesn't work for me. I don't do well with test taking. I don't love to read. I was more of a magazine person, and that went through college, right? And so, my first college semester was a 1.8. I don't blame that all on my learning disabilities. I blame that some on the frat parties, but that's for another story. And so how do I turn that around and get all my homework done and use the outlet of sports? I was a springboard diver in college, to have that be where I excel, because that's more hands-on than school. And so, having, and struggling with ADHD and using that as my superpower, I can multitask anybody out, and using that hands-on learning. I also have a hearing deficit. And so my whole life, watching everybody's nonverbals is my superpower. I can quickly tell and turn my tone or what's happening around just by watching those nonverbals, because I could not always hear. And so, turning that and making that a superpower, along with everything else. And so turning those struggles and those challenges, I encourage you to flip them around, turn them into your superpower, and it just helps you excel. And sometimes it's just realizing that the nonverbal communication and watching that is my superpower. I can tell with on the calls that this sales call is going to go through within seconds and I have landed it, or I need to change my, what's going on. And I have that, even as CIO, and being a leader as well, right? You can read the room really quickly without hearing anything, and change that around so that, things are up on the positive and not so going down.
That's so fantastic. No, I love that. Like turn your biggest insecurity or the thing that would be perceived,
Yeah.
Maybe traditionally as a challenge into your
Right.
superpower.
Right.
So one of the superpowers that I've been tapping into is probably a chatterbox, early on, but I've used the gift of gab to connect to awesome people like you guys. So,
I love it.
so I'll go ahead and say that too. So as we were preparing for this as well, some of the other women that are going to be joining us throughout the course of the week, we're also sharing different areas in which, not necessarily adversity, but stories from their career path in the workplace where they had to brag on themselves or make it known that they did something, wonderful, or, hey, reminder, and I tend to call this, the non-performance performance review, where you have to keep a tally on what you contributed and what you've done throughout the course of the year, because sometimes those hero moments or that client compliment or that, killer presentation gets forgotten in the day-to-day and everything that we have to do because we're so busy. So I'd love, Sonal, you recently had a promotion that was formally announced, and I'd love to hear from you in that area. How did you go about that? What did you have to do to talk that through? And has that changed what you do? Does the title change, how you behave or work? And what does that imply for your responsibility for the women that are coming up the ranks around you?
Okay, that's quite a few questions, but we're going to start with, I think I'm still working on my superpower, or at least understanding, because I think it evolves depending on how we want to be perceived in the world, and also what our responsibility is, and to get, to not only for our day job, but also for whatever we have our passions in our community. Going back to one of the things that one of the leaders that I worked for, in this particular case, a male, that really challenged with me, and it's still a bit of my Achilles heel, which is writing, right? I think the art of writing has been the ups and downs, right? My now adult children really don't have writing as handwriting as one of their probably superpowers, unless they choose it to be, because they grew up in the keyboard era, right? And so now, thankfully, technology has helped us get back into the whatever tool you use, whatever AI tool you use, right? I prefer the Google. Some people like the chat, whatever it may be. It's allowing us to get back to skills that takes us from the mental to actually the physical, which is, the writing skill. So maybe about, oh gosh, maybe 10 years ago, maybe a little less, but one of that was at that time, my direct manager, and I had a team that I led, was you need to take out a global communications. I used to do these types of events and have conversations orally and visually. To Rebecca's point, really, it's sometimes what people do but perhaps don't say is really important to grasp. But then it took me to a whole new place, which was I had to write and had to publish. And that, it took me hours and hours and hours. But if you fast forward to where I am now, and thank you for recognizing that and taking into a leadership position, right? It's now I actually find the joy in taking the Mondays and curating some information that, my company has sent to me, or I've picked up in third-party places like LinkedIn or other, blogs or places that people have either shared their wisdom, or, books that I'm reading or listening to, and actually make notes on it. And then by the end of the day, Friday, close my book. And then on Monday, my book is open, and I kind of figure out what I want my voice to be to my partners, my community, my internal stakeholders. And now I'm willing to share it with a lot more confidence and ease. And actually, people are recognizing it. So something that was a real bit challenge, like Rebecca was sharing, and thank you, Rebecca, for sharing your story. It's very inspiring. It has been my Achilles heels for probably the entire part of my career. And now, yay technology, right? And yay leader who really pushed me. I mean, really hard pushed me, but I'm so thankful now. And my team challenged me, and we came up with ideas that now I can bring forward with myself in a leadership position that, it's being recognized. And when people say things that's and it's that part of the self promotion you talked about, Paula, but not exactly on like the yearly or whatever company performance review you have. And I would just leave you with this. The last thing is that even now in leadership position, it's almost like, well, what am I going to do next? I mean, Rebecca's talking about, like 3 or 4 or 5 different things that she's doing like now, right? And I also had that piece of wisdom from someone else that said, to really feel confident, whatever your spending goals or your family responsibilities or your even to yourself is like 5 revenue streams is kind of the way it should be. And I'm like, oh boy, I kind of have two, my job and my savings. Well, now I'm starting thinking about like, what else can I do? It doesn't have to all be revenue oriented. It could be a revenue stream that I'm giving back. Like I joined recently a nonprofit board called We Can, and it's been really, really inspiring because it's now meant for a group of women mostly that haven't made it, that are looking through their journey and how to elevate kind of in that middle management role, because that's where honestly I got this most stuck. And I think that is the hardest part, is going from an individual contributor to a people manager like yourself, Paula, to perhaps, taking it to Rebecca's place where you're owning your own business and doing a lot of other things. But also for me in corporate America, where the path is not straight, it's kind of zigzagging like this, but still within one company or a few companies, how to do, you said, self-promote when it's the right time, find the right people that will be your sponsor, taking on the jobs that perhaps a lot of people don't want to do, but you're like, okay, I'm going to do it, but then you have to challenge yourself to do it really well. So those have been some real life lessons for me, and I continue to figure that out every day.
No, I think that's so great. And it's so important to, it's really important because when you get to the point where it's nuanced about you understanding and having the confidence in what you do and who you are and your contributions to an organization, it's not bragging anymore. It becomes inherent. And I would have never known you didn't like writing, because those emails we get every Monday are amazing curated content. It gives us little snacks of what we need to know for the week. But more importantly, I think it's interesting to see that something, again, you didn't even know you turned something into a superpower, right? Because it was something that you didn't necessarily love doing, and now it's part of your day-to-day. So we have a couple of questions that came in that I think align perfectly with where we're at. So I'm going to go ahead and interject one here. A question came up saying, what strategy should we continue today, and what should we stop doing? I think that's just as important, to think through the prioritization of what not to do moving forward. So Rebecca, I'll start with you on that one. This is a great question.
Yeah, almost like a kind of hard one, right? So today I can tell you that I'm not a writer, but I'll journal. So like I'll carry a journal with me because I'm going on vacation, and write things down and roadmap out what I want to do. And then being able to look back at that in a year and be like, oh, wait, I achieved that. Oh, I squirreled over on this way and I need to realign. And so I really rely on doing that to keep me focused and have those strategies. I also always set a crazy goal for myself every year, which is usually like leaves my family like shaking their head like she's at it again. So the marathon I spoke about, right? I had never done a marathon before. I not too long ago told everybody I was going to do my first half Ironman. I had done a couple triathlons, and so set out, got that done. And so looking for the next the goal. And so I would say that would be, the recent one was setting off and doing the nonprofit. Everyone's like, you're starting another company, what are you doing? And now seeing that successful. And so, I'm working on finding the next goal. I've been powerlifting lately. And so this crazy thought in my head that I might actually go do one of those shows. Which is totally out there. But then what not to do is stop beating yourself up. I do it all the time, and I need to listen to my own words, but in my own head, you still have that voice that's like, no, you can't actually do that. Or there's people that are better than you, and worrying about what people think. Just stop. If you have an idea in your head, place that roadmap, jump off that frickin' bridge and figure it out on the way down is what I just keep telling people, because the road's going to change on the way down, and that's okay. But just jump, because it's going to be an amazing ride.
That's amazing. Sonal, I think we need to do the turkey trot this year to keep up with.
Yes, come do
Where in
it.
the world should we do the turkey trot, Paula? Let's just figure that one out, because that's the fun part too.
Let's
I
pick
like
a
it.
city. Exactly. All right, Sonal, I'd love to hear your answer on the same question. It's such a great one.
So maybe I'll start with what to stop. So it's interesting because, it's a big, we're now into almost April, but at the beginning of the year, talking about things in life, and it's just a chance to reflect and then to start new. And one of the things, just the way I am with, aging in parent care and adult children and other things, looking at the career and so forth, it's kind of like worry less. And the worry less part for me, just saying it out loud, has just helped me, I think, settle more into things that I want to do. So I would say I'm doing less of the worrying, and that could be in so many different ways. It shows up perhaps, don't care what people think, right? Be okay with your vulnerabilities, right? Be brave, take on that turkey trot or powerlifting, like just things that, whatever that may be, it's just worry less. And then to keep doing. So it's interesting how Rebecca said journaling, right? So my whole life, I've been reminded how important it is to read and write. And those are probably because one's connected to the other, and that's been my challenge. Like school wasn't necessarily a challenge, but those really two particular things have manifested into places that, later in my career, it's clearly been a challenge. And so I'm working really hard on those. And so, I have a journal, so to speak, where I continue to write my work notes. And there's some notes I'll put into the computer that are very important to me and I'll keep. But I think what I want to do is just remind people that writing, because I bring this up because it has been such an aha moment for me, and keeping that journal. And so now I'm taking from the writing of my work notes, which has been so natural, to writing in my life notes. And to Rebecca's point, right? Like helping me reflect and learn and understand, and then also continue to share with other people of how important. And also don't make it really hard on yourself, right? Having a journal, even though maybe it's even one point, it could be a couple pages, it could be just one note, makes it so much easier for you to, for me, for hopefully for all of you, to kind of just go back and reference. So even that becomes something that gives yourself a break, right? So yeah.
Yeah, no, and I'd echo both of those sentiments and say too that I think it's important for us to stop saying yes all the time. And I'm very guilty of that. My role in, working in a startup in general, right? There's always a new thing to do and a new way to go about it. And it's really easy to morph what you're supposed to do with the extra things to add to it. And while that's a noble gesture, if you overpromise and underdeliver, that's not great, right? So the company I worked for before, I told myself I would never do that again. And fortunately, while we do say yes to a lot of things, in my current role, I've really learned how to say, you know what, that's not mine, or I'm going to collaborate with somebody on this to make sure that I'm understanding, where my limits are, right? And you mentioned something too, Sonal, that I think I'd love to hear you guys share. And this was a question that was asked in advance of this. Is, we talk about career, the 9 to 5, which really, come on, let's be honest, it's like 7 to 7 these days. We don't do working girl status anymore. But for those of you too young to know that reference, it's a movie. But we don't have the same timeline anymore. And yet how we show up to work is so dependent on how we show up in our personal lives. If we work out, if we eat right, if we take care of ourselves, if we make sure that we have mindfulness focus, right? We have time with our friends, we bond, we connect, we do what we have to do with our family. We check the boxes on responsibilities financially and personally. And all of those things, getting that job done, those many, many jobs that are outside of the job, are what help us, show up for that. So what are some of the things that you guys do outside of your profession that help you be a better person, better version of yourself? Some of the questions I think were around, like, do you have any hobbies or anything like that? I think Rebecca's mentioned a few, but what type of things do you guys do to ensure that you're showing up with your best self to work at home?
So it's interesting to say.
Yeah,
go ahead, Rebecca. Do you want to start?
No. Go ahead, Sonal.
So, early in my career, we used a lot of the words balance. And I found that really challenging. And it's like, what do you mean? And so now I'm much more confident in saying that I have peaks and valleys, right? So there are some times where I peak quite a bit for work because work has commitments and I have commitments and I feel very accountable and responsible and very proud of my work. And there are other times where family or my personal or things outside of my control like COVID that took on a different way of how we engage with our life. So for me, my personal hobbies, I wasn't a believer in this because it was just a motto that didn't come into our life, but now it certainly is, like sleep. Sleep is really, really, really important because it allows us to therefore be productive in the day that we have or whatever our commitments may be. I did not value it, but I am now as I'm maturing. And because when you're younger, you're like, oh my gosh, I can sleep when, the comment was I could sleep when I'm dead. I don't mean to offend anybody, but that was the comment that people used to tell me. And I'm like, no, I need to sleep now because, I want to live. Right. So it's just a different way of looking at something. So, I probably have three hobbies. My friends are clearly part of my hobby because it is a commitment to make that happen. But I know that if I eat well, I sleep well, I I make sure my mental state is really available for myself and for others. I get outside, right? I think COVID, if nothing else, has taught us that we have this beautiful world that we have to continue to take care of. And if we should go and enjoy it and take that break. So I think these are probably things that we've heard over and over again, but I really believe in it. And it's made a difference for me to do things like travel around the world for work and be okay, and that's a part of my joy too. And actually sometimes mix family or pleasure with work. But once again, I say that when I'm on work, I'm on for work. And then when I have time for whatever it may be, my personal, I have time. And there are a couple times where you kind of have to do a little bit of both. But I found, multitasking and juggling doesn't have the same results that if I just do more of the focus and pick one or the other. It doesn't mean I can always do one or the other.
Oh, that's a really good point. I think prioritizing and focus is key. And that's why mindfulness is so important to me. When I lived in Brazil before moving to New York, which I had no idea of what I was in for in New York, and that Brazil was preparing me for the mental game that would require. It was truly about mindfulness because that helped me then understand, okay, Paula, it's time to sleep. You have to focus on that. I've always been a troubled sleeper. But the other thing too is that mindfulness really allows you to be present. So when you're with your friends or with your family, and Sonal, you and I share that our family lives outside of the country, you really have that quality time and you're not obsessing over what you left behind or the emails that are potentially piling up or how many out of offices you have to return to responses on, right? And so mindfulness is a really important part of what my strategy is to make sure that I compartmentalize the different areas of my life because I do want to excel at all of them. I think we're all, something that all these people share all week is we're very high performers and we like high value outcomes, right? So we don't settle for mediocre or less. That's part of why all of these people are so awesome that are great, that are speaking this week. And so in order to do that, it's really important for me anyway, to focus and make sure that mindfulness is something that I practice. So how about you, Rebecca? We're gearing up to the last 15 minutes here. I'm going to open it up for questions in just a moment, but what do you do in your personal life besides all the things that you already mentioned?
Yeah, so I feel a little bit different, right? So I do tell people, although Sonal, I need my sleep. Believe me, I crash when it's hard for me to shut my brain off, but when I do, I'll tell people I'll sit still when I'm dead because I think it's part of my ADHD and I'm always on the move. And I also find that, like when there's just one thing, or I find it's like the calm before the storm. Like I always have to be kind of doing two things, right? Speaking of which, because I always do two things, I'm like literally on Airbnb looking for an Airbnb while I'm hearing and talking and listening. Like it's just how I work. It's maybe different for others. I also find that I have great phone and work conversations while driving my kids to their sports, which is something that I'm passionate about outside of work. I have two littles. They're 8 and 11, both girls. And one is a very serious dancer who won title this weekend, if anybody's a dancer. So I'm super excited. And we're going out to California for her to join a dance theater for 2 weeks this summer. So hence the Airbnb. But yeah, I'm always doing like doing something. But family is super close to me, which is why I live in this frigid tundra called New Hampshire. Otherwise, I'd be down south because I hate the cold. But everybody is here. And having my mom and my mother-in-law, who are two of my best friends, whether you're allowed to call them that or not, they're always there, and having, you know, friends and being able to go out and check out. And I give that checkout time big, like on the weekends. It's definitely where I don't come down here to the office if I can't, you know, if I don't have to, and check out. And then for me, like I said, finding that sport or that something as that outlet, I always, you know, or I'm running, I'm lifting, I'm doing something. And that's my mental like break. I just listen to music. I need that time. That's when I sort of allow my brain to check out. But then I also at that same time find my brain cooking these new crazy ideas that end up coming through.
That's awesome. No, your creative outlet and the way that you go about it comes at you from multiple facets. But I think that's exactly the point of this week, is that there's not one right way to approach life. And there's not just one path or one, surefire formula to success. It looks like many different shapes, colors, sizes, and, walks of life. And I think that's really important to share. I'm actually glad that we have such diversity even in today's talk. So thank you so much for that. I'm going to ping Ria real quick and see if we have any other questions that came up. And I'll launch the last one that I wanted to ask you guys as the last final question. So for those of you in the audience, you guys will get a recording of this. Sonal and Rebecca's contact information is on LinkedIn as well, so you'll connect there. Part of this too is us wanting to open up and reach out to the community, so we encourage that. And my last question, to think through is, and this is going to sound like a really out there question, but I think it's a really important concept that we all have to learn, especially in the Zoom environment. But for each of you, how have you implemented patience into your career, if at all? Right? So I know that sounds like a loaded question, but I think it's a really important, not only skill, but virtue, to be able to practice patience, both in if you're waiting for that next promotion, if you're trying to figure out what the outcomes of that next thing is. And even both of you are mothers. I don't have that experience, for example, and so even having to understand what that looked like in your career path as you were approaching motherhood, and what that looked like. So I think patience is a really important part of all of it, especially for very ambitious women like yourself. So tell us a little bit about how you practice that while I gear up this last question from the audience.
Who do you want to go first?
I'll start with you, Rebecca. We'll flip through.
Okay, that has been something I've learned over the years. I always want things just like, let's just get them done, right? And not, and being able to understand the backing or the politics behind it, which healthcare has a lot of. And so realizing that I need to pause while everybody else catches up. I say that in the most kindest way, which is why I have these other outlets, because I'm waiting for, that's sort of like my way to practice patience. I've also had physicians literally throw computers at my feet and toss it across the room. And so obviously I'm not going to start yelling in that type of situation. It's staying calm is your best bet in those situations. So I've also learned that as well. And then obviously, having two little ones that, the older one is very studious, type A, likes things in order. The other one came out telling me where to shove it. And so having patience with her and trying to channel her powers for good and in ways that you need to be creative. So that's how I guess I would say I practice that.
That's awesome. And what about you, Sonal?
So I would echo and mirror quite a bit of what Rebecca shared, because patience is a lifelong journey. And yeah. I think different parts of my life and my career has challenged me to be patient in different ways. And even recently, thankfully I do have different sponsors, and, sponsors are not something you ask for. Sponsors is something you figure out, and so it's through doing events like this and listening to other people's journeys and connecting afterwards and doing some self, reflection, is figuring out like who is out there that's willing to help you through this journey. And what patience is something I just, once again, I'm like, oh, I thought I figured out patience, because yeah, you kind of want to like move fast and time to market and getting things done. But yet it's almost like you kind of have to slow down to go fast. And what do you do as you're slowing down? And then Rebecca gave us a lot of great, hints and things that she does. Like, what do we do while we slow down to help that mind just kind of like as a sponge and almost embrace everything that's going around you, to take it all in? And then you're able to move forward, perhaps in a different way, perhaps in something that you didn't hear or see or read or even understand. And for me, a couple of tidbits is like, one, I started to write down more. Definitely have written down more. Two, I call some of my like I said, my board of advisors, some of my friends, especially if it's some bigger decision, because I have to value their time too. Their time is not always there available for me, but just when I need to use it, maybe I'll bounce something off of someone. So I think that will help. And then, like I said, taking a walk or taking a run or going to whatever works for you, right? I try to pick the choice that I feel like has a healthy outcome for me, and healthy could mean mind or body or work productivity. But yeah, patience is such a beautiful thing, and I just look forward to learning more, about your tips,
Exactly.
Paula, on patience.
Yeah. So my tips on patience, it's always about breathing. So if you haven't read or studied or listened to any podcasts on mindfulness, I'll make sure we send that out to everybody that registered, because they're 30-minute snippets. I can't do much longer than that on a podcast. But it really gives you tips on understanding and breathing through concepts. And often the answer is going to be exactly the same and have no impact if you wait 2 hours than if you handle, react, and respond immediately, right? So I think patience comes with a life lesson of pausing. Pausing, I think, ultimately leads to patience in my experience. So we have 2 last questions and we have 6 minutes. So one for each of you here. Rebecca, somebody asked what your advice would be for someone struggling to measure up to academic parameters. So how would you encourage that or answer that question?
Yeah, and I think I put some a little bit in the chat. I like this one. I did end up going on and getting my master's, but it was in something I was passionate about. So I think that helped a little bit with school. But my answer is don't. We've seen so many people excel that don't need a PhD, that don't need a master's, and half of them don't even have a bachelor's, right? So don't feel that you need to go and get that stuff. My advice would be to go get involved, go get on a board, go be part of a women's community. And really it's the networking and the people that you meet and the phone of friends that you have throughout your years and your career at conferences and everything that are going to get you that next job. Hence, fast forward 12 years, the CEO hired me to work under him, right? It wasn't because I had a master's or because I failed my PMP twice and then just said, forget it, I'm not doing that anymore, right? Because I'm not good at it. So it wasn't because of the accolades after my name. It was because of me, who I am, and what I bring to the table.
Thank you so much for that, Rebecca. I think that's so powerful. And Sonal, this one's directed at you. What tips would you give for getting to that point of self-discovery, understanding yourself better? Are there some tactics or strategies? I know you mentioned writing, but is there anything that you give as far as tips for self-discovery?
So I think if we summarize in one word, I think listening. I know we talked about a lot of different things today, but listening, I think that has helped me. And to be a better listener, I have to be more patient, and I have to give myself time to breathe, right? And so all the little nuggets that we've shared today, and I've clearly taken away from both of you, and even the questions that the people have brought forward have helped me think through, like, yeah, this is continuous, right? So, listening is an art. I find myself sometimes listening well, and sometimes I'm like, gosh, I wish I could do that over again. And so therefore, you take it to the next conversation that you have. And I've found that I'm listening maybe in different conversations and listening for different things too. So one of the things we hold ourselves to quite a bit internally at the company I work for and other companies is like, if there's a meeting and you're asking for time from someone else, come up with an agenda, maybe even share the agenda ahead of time to make sure that you're aligned so that when you're in the meeting, instead of thinking about things to talk through, you're actually listening for things that are important for you to be successful or for your team to be successful or for the project to be successful, however it may be. But that's how I would action it.
Yeah, no, I think that's definitely right on. And I think patience and listening kind of connect too. And who would have thought those themes would come together today? I just wanted to give one big thank you to Rebecca and Sonal once again for agreeing to participate in this, sharing your stories, and giving a lot of people on this call a lot of hope. Thanks to my team for helping host everything and for WonderBotz for supporting this passion project all week long.